All right, I think we're live now. So happy Thursday and welcome to our next episode of the live community show here at NoCodeOps Community. So welcome, Rachel. You're our next speaker today, and welcome, Jens, our content manager here at NoCodeOps. So today, if you've been following our series of events here at NoCodeOps, you know that we've been focusing a lot on APIs because we found it to be a really hot topic within our community and also kind of the missing link between a developer and a true no coder. So I don't want to get any angry developers at me right now, but I feel like this is going to empower so many no coders out there and really make almost anything possible. So Jens, that was here just a minute ago, will come back towards the end of our event, and he will be taking over any Q&A questions that you might have or have submitted before during your registration. And so today's topic in particular will be navigating the jungle of APIs, because especially if you're somebody that has just recently started, using APIs or getting into this particular topic, you might still find it overwhelming. And so if you're somebody like me, chances are it's super exciting. You can see the potential, but somewhat it still feels a little bit technical. And so, you can never have enough APIs. And so today we have here Rachel, who's an enthusiast on APIs. I called her an expert, but she prefers an enthusiast. And she will be telling us and kind of guiding us towards all the different choices and resources that we have so that we can explore the ones that would make the most sense to us. So Rachel, can you give us a little bit of an introduction on your background, how you got into no code, and then why do you love APIs so much?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much, Claudia, for that introduction. So about me, I am a marketing technologist, and I actually work for Southern New Hampshire University. And one of our mottos at SNU is we believe in leveraging technology to improve higher education. So we want to get rid of this idea that, the antiquated education system, bureaucracy, slow to innovate. So at SNU, we're all about learning how to leverage technology. And we really believe that no code ops is the way to do this. So I was so excited to join the no code ops community. I'm always learning about new things. And throughout these learnings, I've learned about the marketing landscape and some of these disjointed technologies is APIs are really that power to unlock the potential of development. So really exciting stuff. I would totally recommend the no code ops community for constantly learning.
That's amazing, and I can promise you I didn't tell her to say that. So it's all natural from her heart. Thank you so much,
Yes, a
Rachel.
great resource.
And you've been, such a great member to have within the community because, I was just saying to you at the beginning, like this is the first time that we kind of see each other because we talk almost every day in our discords, but I didn't know you were so young and like, I was like, oh, she's, such an expert. She must be working in APIs and technology for such a long time, but you're just a clever girl.
Yeah, you're flattering. Apparently, I look younger than I am, so I'll take it.
But also I'm so excited because I think you're my first woman, guest speaker here at No Code Ops, and so that's something that I really want to highlight, and I want to empower more girls into the no code space. So let's do it. Thank you so much for being here. Let me just get your screen up. Perfect. And so what will you be showing us today?
Yeah, a brief agenda of what I'll be talking about. So I think in the past decade, especially in the marketing world, but it's not unique to marketing. I work in marketing technology, but whether you're in like sales tech, fintech, working with HR tech, we've seen this changing landscape. So we're going to talk about that. And Chris did such a wonderful job in his webinar the other week about how APIs can be leveraged. We'll be talking about some of the barriers to that and how iPaaS can, solve those barriers. But then once you get into the iPaaS landscape, you have to figure out how to navigate that landscape. So we'll be talking about some of those purchasing considerations to get started in the landscape. But once you're actually into a platform, different methods that these platforms offer, best practices. And then we're going to be talking a little bit about security best practices as well, because as much as we want to learn about APIs, they are really powerful tools. So we know we need to make sure there's kind of some guardrails for security, for governance, to make sure everything works the way that we need to.
Perfect. Sounds good. And shout out to Chris and Sally, our previous API speakers here. So thank you so much for referring to them.
Yes, both of them did amazing jobs. If you haven't seen those webinars, I will be doing brief recaps of them, but I totally recommend checking those out. Also want to make sure that this is going to be totally system agnostic. I'm not going to focus on any one platform of the other. Goal of this is really to just give you the mechanism to make empowered choices yourself.
Amazing, thank you. And if anyone here in the audience, so like YouTube, LinkedIn, feel free to ask any questions you might have, during our live, because, this is your chance to basically learn and explore more with our community. So yes, ask your questions in the chat.
Yeah, so I did want to give I think APIs are a story. I mean, technology is totally a representation of the process and people behind the technology, not just the tech. So I did want to give a little story about why I'm so interested in APIs. Like I said, the tech landscape is totally changing. We see this image on the left, and 2011. I know it's still a lot of platforms, but if you surveyed about like 20 people, there would be a chance that you said, "What are you using for your CRM?" You wouldn't get 20 different answers. But now we look at the landscape today, and it's so disjointed that there's actually like an interactive map that you can go to, because there's over tens of thousands of vendors. And it's great because, you do have that specialty, the specializations that come with emerging platforms. But with that, if everyone's using different platforms, it can be disjointed. And we need to focus on that communication. So that's where APIs really come into play. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize I exited the
No
slide.
worries. I didn't know that map existed, so that's really cool resource
Oh,
straight away.
yes, I can. As I come from the marketing technology world, I cannot recommend enough. Even if you're not in marketing, Scott Brinker, he is a great thought leader. This comes from the Chief Martech website, and I can share all these resources after the chat. And
Amazing, thank you.
inspired by that is also this Martech map, which goes way beyond marketing as well. Yeah, like I already talked about, Chris did an amazing job, but I did want to give a little recap in case anyone couldn't come to that APIs are basically the mechanism of how software communicates with each other. They stand for application programming interfaces. A little lengthy to say, so won't be using that jargon too much. And we have the classic example of the restaurant server. If you go to a restaurant, you have your front end, you're the customer, you're hungry, and you have your kitchen, who makes the food. Your waiter, your server is the communication, how you order to the kitchen. And so that's kind of like an API. Software developers are really incentivized to make APIs because it expands the capability, inspires innovation, automates mundane tasks, and it kind of gives them insight into user behavior that they wouldn't be able to get if they were just focusing on building natively.
That's amazing. I feel like if people, after 3 times, hearing about the food kind of analogy, they either have by now learned about APIs or they're just really hungry.
Yeah, so I apologize for anyone. I know where I'm in New Jersey in the United States, it's lunchtime, so I hope you have your lunch because the food analogy is going to come in a few more times. So I hope everyone has a good snack with them.
I mean, this is just gonna satisfy, everyone's needs, whether it's your brain or your stomach.
Totally. Yeah, so I mean, I don't think I have to preach to the choir here. We know APIs are amazing. They have so much potential. But so where do we start with them? I think traditionally they've just been so overwhelming. They were APIs, fun fact, were created in the 90s. But up until pretty recently, if you didn't have any coding background, you're kind of stuck. Not only do you have to understand what APIs are, you have to learn a whole new language. And if you're just merging all that together, you're like, all right, APIs within JavaScript, what is a fetch call? Like, you're probably just going to give up before you get started. So here is the exciting part of what iPaaS is. It stands as Integration Platform as a Service. And it's basically the mechanism to remove those traditional barriers and make this concept of APIs accessible, whether or not you know JavaScript or any type of coding language. So I did say, Claudia, I was going to bring back the restaurant example. When with restaurants, there's still kind of like a code you have to follow to get the food. Like there's a dress code. Sometimes you need to make reservations. In some restaurants, you have to know like what a sommelier is, which like not everyone knows what that is. But the way I think about it, like remember in the pandemic when everything was going onto food ordering platforms, and all of a sudden I was in New York at the time, and you'd see these 3-star Michelin restaurants were on Uber Eats and they were delivering, and you could literally be in your pajamas and you can have access to these amazing like dishes and foods. And the way I see it, that's kind of what no code is doing for APIs. Like you don't need to follow this protocol, and like if you go to a fine stuff 5-star 3-star Michelin restaurant, you might be intimidated and you might miss out, and you might miss out on like contributing to that community. Well, now it like removes those barriers, which is why it's just so cool. It's so exciting. But I love this question that came up in Chris's webinar, because it kind of put things back in perspective for me. I think when you work with APIs, like Claudia mentioned, it is that connection between like no code and developer. So it's so easy to get overwhelmed and be like, oh no, I don't know the tech as well. Like you get that imposter syndrome, right? Like you're working with you work alongside developers sometimes. But if you bring it back down to like putting it in this visual interface. And so someone in Chris's webinar asked, what's the difference between automation tools like Zapier? And the thing is, like, sure, technically, there's different languages, there's different interfaces, but they're the same thing for what we're concerned about. They achieve the same objective. Again, making it really powerful, making it an awesome tool for the no-code community.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I think this particular presentation is very important, and it's going to provide so much value, because the tools are there. We know the tools, right? We know what they do, and ultimately we know what we're going to use them for. But as you were saying and showing us in those maps, there's such a big and wide choice for us, like that you don't know what to get. And like if you're going to the restaurant again and you have a super full menu, you get overwhelmed with all those choices. And so yeah, you don't know what's the best fit for you. And that's why I think having you today to kind of like directing us through those guidelines will be incredibly valuable to the community.
Yeah, definitely. And I think people who are maybe joining no code community for the first time, I know in our jargon, we talk about Zapier, we talk about Make and these platforms a lot. But if you're just getting introduced to them for the first time, they're automation platforms that make these concepts accessible. So they're really great to learn about. So if you already know like Zapier and Make, some of this might be, regurgitating, but for those who are like new to the landscape, these are some standard components that you could find in most iPaaS systems. I do want to caveat, sometimes iPaaS is also subdivided into iSaaS, which is integration software as a service. And what we no coders are doing with like Zapier and Make, more of kind of the lightweight solutions where you don't know code. Sometimes more technical people like to put us in the iSaaS category because they like to distinguish iPaaS as like whole enterprise solutions that entail, those language libraries, on-premise solutions, and all of that. But honestly, I think if the language at the end of the day doesn't matter too much, as long as we can communicate what we need to. So if you want to call it if you want to call it automation platform, application integration platform, these terms will be used interchangeably. So like I was saying, these are the softwares that basically just make that API accessible. It adds a layer of abstraction on top of that API code, so people who aren't familiar with the code can access it. Some of the key features you're going to see in most every platform is a simple drag and drop simple user face. There's a lot of focus on pre-built connectors, things that make sense. The features are really based on that concept of accessibility and bringing it to the public. Something that's also really beneficial about this software is that it's cloud-based. So the difference between on-premise and cloud-based is on-prem, you have to maintain the systems, you have to hire developers. There's a lot of time involved with security, with maintenance. But when something's on the cloud, it's managed by that provider. So it takes less work, less dev resources. And I do want to caveat that I think the user should be aware of things like, security. When they're vetting a software, check into your provider. And if you do have a trustworthy provider, it's good to be able to offload that. And it's a little more lightweight. With that, because you're not kind of siloed within your own organization, you get access to all these, with a good provider, customer success resources. And if you have an established community, it's going to create a system of shared learning where you get like community-based workflows. You get consultation on how to deal with like creating recipes and scenarios. If there's a software outage, you're not by yourself trying to create the issue. Trying to fix the issue. You're there and the provider's there with you. So it's a great lightweight option. So us no coders, we could focus on our area of specialty. Say if you're using no code to just run your small business, to help you with that, you don't have to be an IT expert. And with IT is like their backlog, drowning in tickets. Sometimes they can't get to your ticket. It could be a simple automation, but if they're not going to get to it in a month and this can provide a solution, it's a great alternative. So we know that, APIs are amazing. iPaaS is amazing. It provides that solution for us. But now we come to the landscape and we're just overwhelmed with what we see. We see all of these images and just wonder, like, how do you navigate all of this? So purchasing an API software is a purchasing decision. So when you think of purchasing decisions, think of it outside of the tech just for a moment. You don't have to be a professional, procurement manager. You just have to kind of think of, before you even put the tech involved, like how you make decisions in your everyday life. Going back to the restaurant, I promise there's only so many metaphors about this, but if you go into a restaurant, you're not going to go into a restaurant as a solo diner, ask for the catering menu, and get like 137 burritos, even if you could technically afford it. Like, it's great, burritos are yummy, but like it's not realistic. It's kind of it's not the best use of your resources. You're going to go to Yelp, you're going to go to Google reviews. You do have some type of like intuitive sense on how to navigate these purchasing decisions. So when purchasing software, you look at reviews, you know what your team can realistically digest, and then you also add in the tech components, which we're going to be talking about here. So outside of just some common sense purchasing decisions, and I'd also recommend, if you are an organization with like procurement, with IT, partner with them. I know no code sometimes gets this bad reputation of being shadow IT. That's not what we're about. We want to partner with IT. We want to partner with procurement because their experience can help us leverage the best considerations. So with that in mind, some considerations we want to make is, first, what's your prior experience? Say you have been using Zapier, so you have some comfort with automation, like what the standard interface looks like. I'll give you a few options of what the landscape can look like. We have Zapier and like Zapier, if you have comfortability with that pre-made connectors and you're familiar with the landscape, that might go into your consideration. Or maybe you want to go for a more robust solution. You also want to think about what methods does the platform support. So we have, our standard out-of-the-box connectors. But then there's things like webhook, actually tapping into HTTP requests. There's different language formats that's going to be delivered. So like we have JSON, we have SOAP, and those are things you're going to want to ask the consultant or the account executive that's working with you.
And this specific case study is for what type of individual, would you say?
So I'd say for anyone looking to get into an integration platform, like for
Hmm.
the first time, some standard things you're going to want to think about is your experience level, the methods that the platform supports, your specific use case, because there are going to be some platforms where, for say your use case, you need to integrate with Airtable. And you don't have too much experience with an automation platform. So it's going to be easier if you have that pre-built connector. One solution may have a pre-built connector already established and the other may not. You technically could run an HTTP request to tap into the API, but if you don't have experience with automation, you might want to start out with something that already has that pre-built connector available for you.
Perfect.
And so that's also another consideration you should make, is just if there's a clean UI, it's kind of like going back to restaurant preferences. There is some like intuitive nature when you're first getting started into something to feel comfortable and like, playing around with a sandbox environment, just getting comfortable with the tool.
Yeah, and I'm just asking in the chat here, what kind of user do you all identify with? It'd be really interesting to know what kind of audience do we have. Are you getting started with APIs? Are you kind of more kind of a moderate user, more of an expert? Let us know so we can see how these kind of use cases make sense for you.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Another thing you want to consider is what type of team you are. Um, so regardless of what type of team you are, I think based on your experience level, explore your free options, explore your like free trials, try before you buy, just to, get your hands wet in the software. But if you are a robust team, like say you're spanning multiple departments, you're going to want something that's going to have that governance structure for you and that, you can secure different data points. You can create your like different team roles. Not everyone just comes in as an admin. Um, so that's a consideration you're going to want to ask and like look in the reviews as well. Another thing at SNU, we're very big on this, being a higher education institute, is compliance and security. For our organization, there are certain compliance standpoints that like we need to meet. Otherwise, we can lose accreditation. It's very serious. So certain platforms, like say if you're working with government data, higher education data, banking data, that's something you're going to want to work through with like your salesperson or account executive. So these are some, you saw there was like 203 listings on G2, but these are a few I was able to pick out. Either there's representation in the no-code community or it's like kind of a good option for us non-coders. I'd say Zapier is one of the classics, and everyone has their preference, but Zapier is great because they're one of, the OGs of the automation platform. Is you have that shared resource of community connectors and a shared library. Make I really love just because of their pricing structure. It's a great kind of API playground to explore and really get your hands wet in those use cases. Let's see, Parabola, I think is great if you're exploring like data transformation and manipulation. It puts it into table views. So it kind of, if you're used to working in like Airtable or Google Sheets, it's like a recognizable view that you can get behind.
We have some fans here in the chat. We've got Isabel. She says make rocks, and then we have Kelly. Hi Kelly. She's a Zapier certified expert and no-code ecosystem architect, but always learning. And we all, Kelly. Awesome series on APIs, and thanks so much, Rachel. So,
Awesome. I love the enthusiasm behind platforms. I am a big fan of Workato, heart of Workato. We use it at SNU. And because we are like, a large academic institution, we need those guardrails for governance, compliance. We work with IT. It's great for our use case. But I think if I were, like just starting out, going into a small business, I would look at Zapier or Make. This showed up on G2 and I've seen reviews everywhere. I don't know how to say it. If someone in the chat does use it, you feel free to correct me.
IF triple T.
IF triple T. Okay, great. I did notice in the reviews that It's good for kind of like personal automations because they have a lot of connections with like smart home and internet of, of all things technologies. So great stuff.
We do have the OG in the chat. Hi, Philip. He says, if this, then that. That's what it stands for.
Awesome. Thank you, Philip. So yeah, I'm like, as if you couldn't tell from me not knowing how to pronounce this, like I haven't used all these, but you can get an idea of what these systems are about by asking other people, engaging with your peers, and looking at like doing your research. When you go to a restaurant, like you're going to go to Google reviews, you're going to go to Yelp. Same deal when you're looking for software. Personal favorite, G2. I love G2, but you do have to take reviews within context, so it's good to get multiple sources. And just consider like the source of where reviews are coming from and good just review practices.
Isabel is asking, would you say Workato and Integromat are or do the same?
That's a great question. Let me go back. So the mechanism of like the pre-built connectors and tapping to the APIs, yes, they do the same. We like using Workato. It's new because I think Workato is a bit of a more enterprise solution in that it encompasses we can work with SDKs, which stands for software development kits. We can also do a little bit more of working with low-code solutions. And since we do work with, more like technical teams outside of like MarTech and no-code operators, it's good for that. And what I do love about Workato, which I'm going to talk about in the DevOps portion, is it provides multiple environments. So if we want to like iterate and do tests, we can push things from development to test to production. So Workato comes from kind of more of the space of like from IT and making it accessible to non-coders, where some of these start out from no coders and expanding. But like I said, it's all about personal preference. I love Workato because even though it is really robust, they make it simple. I do like Make for that same point as well. I like Make. It's a great way to explore, and I think if you're like a smaller business, Make is an excellent solution, and they have a great price point. But once again, all these are my opinion. I want to empower everyone to do their own research and ask around and get as many perspectives as possible. So when we're dissecting what kind of like these solutions entail, so we have these, we're going to go through kind of like the most simplistic all the way to the most complex. So we have pre-built workflows, which simple as it sounds, you plug your information in and it's those community workflows, those community automations where because, if something's been around for so often, they have recommended scenarios. We go to, let's see, we can go to Zapier and we see that you can plug in what apps that you use and then they recommend things to do and you just plug in your information. Next, we have you pick what accounts you want to connect with. So say if you want to connect with Airtable, you see if they have a pre-built connector with that. And then you can determine like what pre-built actions of that connector you want to do. So you drag and drop for Airtable, for example, if you want to update a record, you would click Airtable, you would click update record, and you would drag and drop the fields that you want. We are going to have a use case after this. So I promise this will all be put into context. Next one is using that pre-built connector, but say if they don't have the specific action you want, say if they only have create record, delete record, get a record, but you want to create multiple records and your solution doesn't have that, but they do have an HTTP request on top of that initial connector, you can put in that information so you can expand the capability of that connector. Really powerful stuff because you're not limited to the predefined actions. Another option is using webhooks, which is kind of just like a post request, but it captures things in real time. It automates the information that's being sent from apps. If you're a no coder, you've probably seen in your apps, you see send values to a webhook. So like when an action happens in one app, it sends values to this webhook so it could trigger stuff to happen. Next, we have an HTTP request that is not attached to an already built connector. So this is the most complex, just because since it's not attached to a pre-built connector, you typically have to handle authentication yourself, which depending on the authentication type can be either really simplistic or get a little bit more complicated. Something you have to play around with and just consider security best practices. Something else that we're not going to touch on this, but to just know of, is something called software development kits, which is like a collection of tools that includes APIs so developers can build software for applications. And it's just another tool out there that enables development, and APIs are like one of the tools that developers use for that. So before we get into our little use case, I think this is the last restaurant analogy, but the anatomy of an HTTP method for purpose of this webinar, where I'm mostly talking about REST APIs, since that is kind of what a lot of the platforms us no coders work with. There are things, there's SOAP APIs, and there's things that go greatly out of the scope of this, but I think while you're getting started, kind of start small and expand. So we'll talk with REST for now. If you're looking at a GET request, that's basically you just retrieving a resource. You're going to go into the restaurant and say, I'm just going to pick up my ready-made food. A POST request is when you're actually going to go in, you're going to talk to the waiter and you'll be like, I want them to make me a fresh burger. But then we have a patch request. Say you have that burger and you're like, oh no, I actually wanted like some pickles on that. So you're going to partially update that resource you have, which is important to know because we also have put, which is when you're going to fully update a resource. That's like you just didn't like the burger, you need a whole new one. This is important because if you put a put request when you actually meant to do a patch request, you can erase data, you can greatly best case scenario, you'll get an error. Worst case scenario, you'll completely rewrite your data. And then a delete is you hated the burger so much, you just threw the plate on the ground and you caused a scene and you deleted everything. Cool. So now I think we're going to just put some of this into practice with a little use case using Make. I chose Make for this webinar. Like I said, I love their free option. And I think it gives you a way to explore the APIs and to grow into the solution. So in this example, when we're talking about disjointed systems, say we have a field team. They're using Google Forms. They love Google Forms. They don't want to go to Airtable. That's great. So we need a way for the information we're collecting from Google Forms to get to Airtable for a trivia. We're hosting a trivia night.
This is the best part of any workshop that we have when we finally get to the hands-on. This is when I actually focus and understand what's going on.
Oh, awesome. So yeah, this is, I'm not going to talk about using that, the pre-built automations. I think it's a little self-explanatory. Happy to go back though. So let me just start a new scenario here.
And Jeff, I can see your question, but I'm going to save that up for, towards the end, just for the sake of time.
All right, so this one is that method we talked about. First, we're going to want to get the responses from Google Sheets. We just have that plug and play connector. And these sources, they make it very easy. In this case, my account is already it's already hooked up. If it's not, it usually prompts you to log on. Like one of those OAuth scenarios will pop up in your window, and it'll just prompt you to log into Google Sheets. Same with Airtable, it'll ask you for your API key, basically whatever method of authentication. If they have a pre-built connector, they'll make it plug and play and they'll make it easy for you. So in this case, let's see. So we have the information in coming from the Google Sheets. So we're gonna use a real-time trigger. This is separate from setting up an individual webhook, but it's based on that concept of real time. So we're gonna watch the rows.
We need some background music for these intervals.
And this is just to show you the easy nature of the plug and play. I already have my connection established. Clicking the spreadsheet. Good thing, important thing to note about Google Sheets. You're going to want to put your headers. It makes it so much easier to work with the data when you have those headers. All right, and just to show you how it would work, I'm going to just put in a test example.
I love dogs too.
I love that. It was like the first thing that came to my mind. All right, that came in. So now we're gonna run that. In Make, you can actually just run specific modules. And pretty much all of most iPaaS solutions are gonna have that. Like Zapier, you can do that. Mercado, you can choose to do that. In Tray, you can choose to just run specific scenarios. It's just all about like figuring out how to find where they exist. But all of them have that.
Speaking of dogs.
Yes, that is my dog.
That's how you call an API, and it actually that's when the API actually replies back.
Yeah, that's actually the secret. All right, so here we see that all that info came in. And what's great about iPaaS, instead of having to maneuver, parsing JSON or doing that code, they come in all pre-populated. Hopefully that is the end of Mars saying hello. All right, so in this next example, we are going to make an HTTP request. And one of my favorite things to do while learning about just how to maneuver an HTTP request is go to free open APIs. Because I noticed when I was getting started, the authentication component was throwing me off a little bit. So what I did is I went to this open API where you don't have to worry about authentication and they give really clear documentation. This one's Open Trivia API, but there are resources such as like a movie database and all that. And they will help you like generate what you have to put in.
That's cool. And we're going to share all these URLs and all these kind of resources after the presentation. So whether you're in our Discord, and if you're not, you should be, because that's the place to be nowadays. So if you're not in our Discord, we'll make sure it gets to you after our event as well.
Awesome. I'll try to run through this. I know I'm coming up on time a little bit, but
yeah, we've got 20 minutes left.
All right, so we think about those components of the, how to work with APIs. We want to, in this example with the trivia, we want to get a question. We want to get that resource. So we can work with that component of what they gave us in the API URI. So in this case, we can either just put it in the URL. These are what's known as parameters. Or a lot of times with these automation solutions, they give us they give us the option to plug it in. This is going to be important when you think of authentication, because these platforms, encode stuff. So for this purpose, it's not important. We're just talking about the number of questions we want to get. So whether we put in parameter, whether we put in the URL, That's great. What we're going to want to work with in this case is JSON. We're going to have them parse the response. So I'll just run this request. And you'll see what we get back. Part of what you're going to get back in your response is headers, which is basically just information about what you're getting, like information about the bundle. The actual data we want here will be stored in the data results, but the headers are good to work with if you get with more complex HTTP requests that require authentication or require a certain like language type. You're going to want to know that. I know I'm breezing through this. I do want to.
Yeah, actually, 4 minutes left.
Okay,
because I wanna have enough time, for the Q&A as well.
Yeah, totally. I'm just gonna touch on Airtable documentation. I think they're a great resource if you're just playing around in APIs.
For sure.
So in this use case, we don't see what we want in the Airtable pre-built connectors. We want to be able to post multiple records. So our authentication is already taken care of with the pre-built connectors. And if you go to Airtable, your documentation, it's tailored for your specific base, which is really great. And you can actually just Google Airtable API documentation, and it'll write out example requests for you.
Amazing. So, just the importance of a clear documentation, just like what we discussed last week.
Yes. So we put in that URL. Our method is post because we want to create. And a lot of this was actually just taken from Airtable. So it's a great way to get started. But what I did is I was able to use those data pills from those previous methods that I was able to get. So we have our trivia question that we put in. We got the results. We have the email address. And in this use case, we're able to put that into our Airtable CRM. So just some considerations for success is that you want to have clear documentation. If you're this platform that you're using, you want to consider if it supports versioning, and if you want to have just an idea of like the use case that you're dealing with, being able to share knowledge, and understand like if the platform can support your needs and your plan.
Perfect. And just a heads up to everyone here in the chat, don't make me rush my guest speaker. Start thinking about your questions and start writing them in the chat.
And we can always go back, like based on the questions, I'm happy to go back to some of these best practices. What I did skip over, documentation, yes. Think about how your automations work in like the context of your tech ecosystem. So you don't want to have like infinite looping. So say if you have an automation that updates a record and you have another automation that's based on the updating of that record, filter stuff out, create conditions. I'm happy to go into that in more detail. All considerations you'd like to make. Security best practices, I do have to mention this, even though we're at the end. You want to treat your API keys like tokens and passwords, and please never hard code data. What's great about these tools is they do have methods to encrypt stuff for you. So don't be poor Joe Schmo who gives his social security card number out and he hands the hackers his money. Don't want that. And like I said, if you are working with an IT department, it's great to collaborate with them. And lastly, we can just learn from our IT peers and those departments, our developers, and just having an emphasis on collaboration, thinking about security, thinking about reliability. And I know DevOps doesn't necessarily work for all things no code, but if we take lessons from what DevOps is and just that attitude of collaboration, continuous development, we can implement that into our strategy with these automation platforms and build for success.
Fantastic, amazing. Oh, I love the final slide. Keep, happy, automating for sure. Keep on learning. That's something that we do every day. And yeah,
Yes.
I can see our friend Jens is here. So Jens, hi, welcome back. Do you have any exciting news for us before we head over to our Q&A?
Just so you know, I have been here in the background. I've heard everything.
Yes, we could feel your presence. And
Thank you so much, Rachel. It was so interesting. So interesting to listen to it. Uh, I won't be long. I just want to share our amazing API bootcamp that we're launching in little bit about over a month from now, in the beginning of March. So the main question or the main problem we hear from the operators when it comes to learning about APIs is, where do I start? Like, what is the path I should take to learn everything I know to learn? Uh, and on each of these API lives, we're basically going through one piece of that. So if you're really serious about learning about APIs and want to use that in your company, I really think you should take a look at our API bootcamp. I'm showing the link over here. You will also get it in as an email after the event, along with the event recording, so you can watch Rachel once again. But if you're serious about the API, take a look at our API bootcamp that will be kicking off in about 1 month.
amazing. Thank you so much, Jens. Aren't you lucky, everyone? Like we were giving out so many goodies here and with such, amazing speakers like Rachel, Chris, Stanley, we're gonna have Guy coming up next week and Jason. So, there's never a moment to get bored here at No Code Ops. So before we send you off, we do have some questions here from our audience. And Jens, do you mind if I read the one from Jeffrey in the chat, and then you can, just go ahead with everyone else? Just because I left him holding up. So, how do you manage to work with no-code tools alongside the IT team at the university? Is there a clash of interest? How do you manage the relationship? Can you elaborate?
Great question. I think one of the benefits of being at an organization that's been around for a while is we do have some established procedures in place. So we do have a team, like whenever we onboard new platforms with any department, we have to go through InfoSec, we have to go through procurement, and that kind of it puts guardrails in place that we're working with IT standards. They can check out the security, the reputation of the vendors. A lot of the things that we do in the marketing department, we're focused on like enabling like the things that we own, what we specialize in. We don't want to, step on anyone's toes with like IT and, their role. But if we're thinking about like how to leverage leads or how to like work on email communications, I think that's where no code really helps us boost our skill set.
Perfect. I hope that that helps, Jeffrey. And the last one from the chat, Jens, I can see Kaufman. Has anyone seen a graph or data on iPaaS services with the axis on cost and security? I have not. I don't know about Rachel, but I have not. I have not seen that graph.
That is a great question. So axis on, yeah, that is a great question.
Have you seen that graph? I haven't seen that graph. And maybe Kaufman, we can make that graph in the community.
I would think that if anyone were to have it, probably a service like Gartner or Forrester, they actually sell their review services to large enterprise clients, so they would have really detailed metrics on these type of insights.
Perfect. Was there any pushback initially when implementing no-code tools? Good question, Ben.
Definitely. I'm really fortunate that our team at SNU, we literally have a mindset that says like lessons, not losses. So we do work in like an agile methodology where experimentation's embraced. And we want to learn what's best. But I can see it being at organizations. I have been at organizations in the past where people are a little bit more hard line. And I think it's about that mentality. It's about that tech is a reflection of the process and the people. So you have to kind of get a process mentality going of like collaboration and agile mindset before you can really bring in any tech. But if you are struggling to that, you can always emphasize that it's not about replacing, it's not about being shadow IT. No coders are not shadow IT. We work alongside IT, and we're helping IT because we're not, they have huge backlogs. We can work on our specialties and not bog them down with, simple automations.
100%. Okay, I think that is all from the chat. Jens, did you have any questions from our registered users?
There should be one on the screen right now, isn't it?
Oh, let me see. What will managers, stakeholders want to know when choosing the tool? What should we share to get the buy-in?
Yeah, so this is going to be different for everyone's use case. I can speak to what I've experienced. Security and compliance is going to be really big if you're in an institution where you're dealing with sensitive data. If you're working with an IT department, they're going to want to audit that. And then, of course, the cost factor. So say if you are presenting to stakeholders, I would recommend giving kind of an analysis of the landscape so they have an idea of what like a standard price is. And it's going to vary depending on the value proposition, but giving kind of a representation of like different enterprise softwares versus different, mid-market solutions, just so they can get an idea of the landscape.
Perfect. All right, over to you, Jens. What do the people want to know?
As you were talking, I've been going through the questions we had beforehand. So you basically answered everything people asked before the event, and much more, of course. If there's any more questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. What do you think will happen in the nearest future in this field? What are you looking forward to? That was from me, by the way.
A great community member called Jens.
No, that is I think we're reaching our next phase of maturity. And in the marketing operations landscape, we talk about this all the time. There's kind of like a growth curve that happens when things are first introduced. You have this, whoa, let's look at all the possibilities. Let's just like kind of recklessly create. And that's how you learn. It's awesome. But we're getting to this maturity stage where we have to kind of think about planning how things work inside the holistic ecosystem, like what tech actually is and it's supposed to represent and what it's supposed to solve. So we're becoming more diligent than that as we kind of like figure out these technologies. We're kind of growing up as an industry, and it's exciting to be part of.
That's amazing. I have one question then before we wrap up, and before I destroy my desk. What do you think should be improved in the world of no code? Like, it's empowering so many people. It's empowering so many operators, and they're becoming a little bit more technical with these APIs. What should be the next step?
Right. I'm so happy you're asking this. I breezed through this slide a little bit about best practices. I think you're going to want to visualize and kind of architect before you build. I know I said this like 3 times, but tech is a reflection of your process. If you don't understand how things interact with each other on paper, your tech it's not going to work because you don't know like what your objective is. So getting a better understanding, putting processes in place, creating documentation that knowledge can be shared. All these are kind of those like boring operation principles, but it's so essential to our industry growing.
Perfect. Oh, we do have one more question from Luis Mendez. Are you still seeing a good percentage of no-code apps that aren't providing service accounts? I still see many are tied to individual user email accounts.
Oh, that's interesting. I'm just wondering if the question meant like a customer support user email, like a support person tied to like these automation platforms.
Or maybe like a team account. Yeah, can you elaborate, Luis, and then we might be able to get back to you. We still got 5 minutes. Data loves to be locked in the ivory towers, traditional B Corps, says Ragnar Rocker.
Yeah, the way I interpreted that is, I guess that it looks like a personal account. I think that's a message about kind of marketing. Sometimes if people see it looks like a personal account, then, they feel like they're talking to something more personal. But like I said, I don't know the question too much.
Oh yeah, like as a company account.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
I know, like, in sales, sometimes people, like, if it goes to a general inbox and gets routed, but, it gives that idea of personalization. So all just like little marketing and cool automation tricks we can apply.
Awesome. All right. If there's no any more burning questions here in our chat, I guess we can set our guests free. Thank you so much. Oh, we do have. Oh, thank you. I love the sound effect.
Yes, and I'm happy to share any resources. I'm a little sad that I had to breeze through all of the best practices and the security considerations. So please, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm in the Discord. If anyone wants to chat about this further, please let me know, and I'm happy to chat.
Fantastic. I'm gonna keep any more questions that will come. Same thing. Reach out either to Rachel. Feel free to reach out to me. LinkedIn, Discord, you can find us everywhere, and we'll make sure that we get your questions answered. Unfortunately, we have run out of time.
How can
Jens,
people connect with you, Rachel, the best?
yeah, let's
LinkedIn.
share some links.
Yes, LinkedIn is the best for me. I think that may have been in the event description. And then also on the Discord.
Amazing. And we have people here saying, thank you for the great presentation. Thanks, Rachel. This was super informative. And yeah, I totally agree. Thank you so much for being here with us today and sharing your expertise and just, your knowledge and experience with the world of APIs. And I hope that everyone can feel even more empowered after today's presentation and can make really informed decisions, when choosing the right API for them. So thank you so much. Great job, Rachel. And I hope, we get to work together somewhere in the future. I'm sure I'll see more of you in the community. So very grateful to have you with us.
Yes, thank you so much. Very happy to be here.
All right. And for everyone else here, I'll see you all next week. Goodbye.
Bye, all.
Take care. Bye-bye.